honor of September being Neonatal Intensive Care Unit Month, I had the pleasure of asking one of our friends' daughters that I've known since she was little, and she has an amazing story to tell you about her son that was born 3 months earlier. And I can't say anything more except the perseverance and the love and faith and everything that went with Evan, and how Evan is just doing wonderful today. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Alise Randall. Alise, how you doing today?
Good. How you ladies doing?
I'm doing great.
Doing great.
Yeah, I heard you have an amazing story that you could share with our people today.
Yeah, it's quite a mouthful, so I'll try to give you a little hint at what it was like. So back in 2020, I was pregnant, in 2019. We went into the new year. My husband and I had recently bought a house, and we're like, okay, well, we're going to bring our son home earlier or later in the summer. And it went very quickly from, oh, he's coming early. So I was actually working at the time. All my scans were normal at 20 weeks, everything measured appropriately on time. And I was actually leaving work a little early for my 28-week appointment, just as I was off work early. I was like, great, I'll head there early. So I head to my doctor's office. They do an ultrasound, and they notice that he's measuring very small. And my blood pressure was out of control. But I had no symptoms. So I had no indication that anything was wrong. Evan was kicking. I had no spotting. There was no indication that there was a complication at that point. So they sent me over to a local hospital in Geneva for monitoring. I was only there for, 3 hours or so. And my doctor is actually on call there. So he drove over, met me there. And then he said, if things start to go faster than we want, we really want you to be somewhere where there's a higher level NICU. And the closest one is in Winfield. Mm-hmm. So they transported me from Delnor to CDH and admitted me there and really just were monitoring me. So for all the things that they look for preterm labor, blood pressure, vitals, making sure my labs were good. So at that point, everything was okay, but my blood pressure was a little high and I was responding to meds. So they thought, well, we'll monitor you for a couple of days. Hopefully your blood pressure is under control. And then we can send you home and put you on a modified bed rest. And let's see how far we can get you in this pregnancy. And then very quickly, within like 12 hours of that first conversation, my lab started to get worse. They put me on what's called magnesium, which is a drug that can prevent seizures. Because at that point, I was a seizure risk at that point, and a stroke risk, just because my blood pressure was climbing and my body wasn't responding anymore. And so at that point on April 5th, around, I think 2 a.m, again, kind of a blur, around 2 a.m, they kind of rushed in, and there was more and more people, and then more and more people, and a lot more people. And at that point they said, yeah, he's got to come out now. You're no longer stable. He's no longer stable. We have to exit the premises at this point. So had an emergency C-section at that point. They had stabilized me and then took him right away to the NICU. So I got an update a couple hours later, and they had said, he's honestly great. He was only vented where they intubate. He was only vented for 4 hours. And then they took it out because he was fine. So he was on kind of a high flow nasal cannula, which is oxygen, but not on a ton, and was honestly just really small, but very, very stable. So they stabilized me at that point. I really couldn't see him for the first 24 hours, just because my body wasn't quite stable. Mm-hmm. So I was on bed rest for a little bit. At that point, Mike was able to go visit him. And then that started our NICU journey. So the NICU journey total was 79 days. Wow. Until we were able to take him home, which, being in healthcare, I knew it would probably be close to my due date when he'd come home. You always hope that, oh, well, maybe it'll be sooner, or maybe we can take him home after a month or so. But they eventually had kind of told us, like, yeah, he's going to need time to grow. So he was considered what's called a feeder grower. That's what they label the babies that are very stable, just need more time. They need to learn how to get bigger, So way more. They need to be able to control their own temperature, and then eat safely and successfully, and take in enough that they're gaining weight like they should. So then at that point, we did the whole driving back and forth to the hospital, and Mike had gone back to work after about a week, just because we wanted him to save the time for when we actually brought Evan home. And then I couldn't go back to work yet because I had a lifting restriction from the C-section. So I was off work for the 6 weeks there, and then I stayed off on FMLA. And luckily my employer's great, and they were very supportive and said, yeah, you take as much time as you need, or that you can. And that way, once Evan's home, I would have my maternity leave with him versus being on maternity leave when he was still in the hospital. So I couldn't really bank that time, So so really just in the NICU for a long time. We got to know a lot of the nurses there, who are wonderful. And, just had every day something new. A lot of days there weren't anything new. It was just kind of going, well, he's a little bigger and he's doing well. And so we'll just do the same thing again and again and again until he gets big enough to come home. So, and then he left June 23rd, I think, 23rd or 22nd. So it was a couple days after my due date. My original due date was June 20th. And we brought him home a few days after that due date, once he had passed all of his tests to safely come home. So we came home on no oxygen, no support. The only thing we had to give him were some medications, a diuretic, and some extra vitamins, just to kind of keep things, good and good levels. But for being born so early, we really didn't have any major complications. He just needed time. He needed time to grow, and they did a really, really great job there. So yeah, and then I was off maternity leave until kind of end of August, and then my mom helped out for I think 2 or 3 weeks full time, so that I could go back to work. And then Evan started in a in-home daycare where he goes 3 days a week. To kind of match my schedule. And then Saturdays, my parents will help us out for a few hours between when my husband has to leave for work. He's on second shift as a police officer. And then by the time I get home from work. So we have about a 3 or 4 hour gap where we need coverage on a Saturday. And my parents have been really gracious to help us out since we brought him home. So there's my NICU in a nutshell. So.
I have a question for you. Okay.
Sure.
And you just went through and of course you're talking about it just like you've been through it, and then you can refer back to it. But I'm sure that it wasn't as easy throughout different points of time. So did you have besides family, which is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but did you have some support systems or things that you could tap into that maybe the hospital offered you, or possibly that you could share?
Yeah.
Because there's people out there that maybe have a little tougher situation, not that yours wasn't tough.
Yeah.
Right.
Not at all. Yeah, sure. It's just different. Everyone's in a different spot. So,
right.
Luckily for us, we had my parents involved, friends and family that helped us out. The complication, which now isn't as big of a deal, but I had him right when COVID hit. So they didn't allow visitors. There were visitor restrictions because we didn't know what COVID was yet. We hadn't really learned what to do. So, there were restrictions. It was just either me or Mike could see Evan, and that was it. As far as support, the social worker at the NICU was great. So she took care of all of the background stuff, so I didn't have to stress about it. So stuff with insurance, making sure it's filed correctly, making sure we get Evan covered on the right insurance plans, so that we can keep the same doctors, and it's just an easier transference of care once he's discharged. She did give me a couple of online groups. So there's a group that I'm on Facebook, actually. It's called NICU Mama. And it's a online Facebook group that you have to join. It's a private group. So, you can opt to join. You have to say, why do you want to join? Do you have a NICU? Are you a NICU parent? Do you have a NICU baby? But that's been great. So anytime I've had questions, we brought him home and we thought maybe he had reflux, but the doctors weren't sure, I would go to that group and I put out a poll to the moms and go, I'm seeing these things. who's had this situation. I have a 29-weeker, and this is what he was born with as far as diagnoses. Does this match anybody? And so there's been plenty of times that I've looked at that group, and I've gotten exactly the same response from that group that I have from Evan's specialist. So that's been a nice outreach. They didn't allow in-person counseling at the time. So I did some like telehealth counseling, which I got for free through my employer. You know, they give you a couple of free sessions, which was very helpful. But again, nothing could be in person. So it really limited at the time what you had access to. But yeah, that NICU Mama group I follow, there's a couple of groups on Instagram that are like preemie mama groups. There's a couple of therapy ones that I was told about that were like motor milestones, like the post videos of how to adjust things when your baby's smaller. You know, like Evan is on the shorter side. He's very proportional, but he's just riding his own little growth curve, but he's doing great. But when you put a baby usually in like a bouncer or like a standing activity table, right, their feet touch. His feet won't touch. So I was like, well, how do I do all these things with him? But baby equipment isn't always made for everyone's same size, right? So going to that group, there was an idea someone brought up of folding a bunch of blankets on top of an extra couch cushion to raise the floor so that your baby could use a normal activity bounce. So you don't have to buy anything. So it's like, well, who has the money to do all that when you have NICU bills and you have other things, and everyone has bills and other parts of their life to manage at the same time, you know? So that group is really helpful. The social worker also gave me it's a free app. It's called Family Album. And it's a free like photo and video app. Kind of like a Google Drive, or people use the cloud to store videos on. So it's a free app that you can privately send this invitation to through either desktop or texting, and people can download the app for themselves. And then us as parents, so Mike and I could either post a video or a picture to it. So the social worker recommended that because she's like, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by people contacting you, because people mean well. And of course, like, I love to hear from people, but I also get bogged down when there's like 30 text messages of, hey, how are you? That's so great. And I'm so glad people checked in, but it can be overwhelming because you feel like, I want to get back to everybody. I don't want to upset anyone. So it gave us a really great way to share Evan's progress through that stay. And then I still use the app. You know, so even now, you know, I posted pictures to it over the weekend of Evan doing stuff at home, or so that's been fun because it kind of chronologically keeps everything together, and people can comment on it, much like Facebook. It's just more of a private way. And at the time, you know, people knew at work I had him earlier. My close friends knew, but because, you know, of COVID hit, you know, I wasn't sure if I'd have a baby shower. Like stuff like that, you know, you make all these plans and plans change, but especially because of the pandemic, you know, you really couldn't do things in person at that time. And people have different levels of comfortability, and I respect that. And so at the time you were like, well, do we do a virtual baby shower, which I ended up doing, which was great. So people had shipped stuff to our house, which was super nice. And so anytime people would send our baby shower gift to the house, I would either take a picture with it or, you know, send them a little message through that app to say, hey, thank you so much, I received your gift. And because we didn't get to do the usual things that you do as a parent. So not just the NICU stay, but mostly because of COVID, honestly. So yeah. But there's a lot of great resources now. And I think because of COVID, there's a lot more where they didn't really have as many. So we were kind of trialing that NICU group, and they have support groups. A lot of hospitals have support groups. Again, they canceled them because of COVID. So they gave you this nice handout of things you could do that you couldn't attend because you couldn't meet in person. But yeah, the online ones were great. And I still follow that same Facebook group, and you can, you know, it's just such a great resource of people that totally get it. And can kind of like chime in when they're like, this formula isn't working. What about this one? Or, you know, I need a referral for speech, and how does that go? And so, yeah, there's a lot of great online resources now that there weren't 2 years ago. So it's only getting better, I think.
Yeah, and it's true. And I think this is in like everything across the board. I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here doing this like we are right now if we didn't have that
Right.
happen. And I know that this is like we don't want to look back and say, I mean, no one ever wanted that to happen. But in a different
Sure.
world now that we are, as technology
Yeah.
has like evolved, it really is nice because you don't have to travel somewhere too. And if maybe, and also like if you're feeling like you just need that answer and it's quick, most people are very happy to be able to, be that person to give you that answer, just like you're being that person right now, sharing to others, and I think if more people did that in every aspect of their life, we would all have a fuller, happier, like feel more generous because we are helping people. So Laura, do you have any questions or anything?
I just want a couple of things, and it's just amazing what you went through. I mean, you're making it sound like it's so easy, but I know what kind of a woman you are. I mean, you were a strong woman and stuff. So, how much did Evan weigh when he was born?
Oh boy, a little over 2 pounds.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, They refer to it in grams. They're very British over there. They use like grams and ounces. I think 2 pounds, 0.5 ounces. I think.
And how long was he? How long was I'm just trying to get a size here in my mind.
Yeah, for sure. So I think 13 inches.
Wow. Now, could you imagine?
Yeah.
That? Oh my God.
So, it's one of those things where, they were like, well, he's very stable. He just wasn't stable, in your system anymore. And he needed more support. And he was much safer that way. But yeah, so 2 pounds, 2 pounds, 0.5 ounces, I think that's the number that's coming to mind. Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. And we left the NICU around just over 6 pounds.
Wow.
And that was, between initially they do kind of like a tube feeding. So it's like an NG tube that they'll put down the nose to do formula until the baby is safe and has the right reflex to learn how to suck and swallow, right? To either breastfeed or do formula or bottles or whatever people decide. But I think common misconception and something I didn't know until this experience was there's not a lot of calories in breast milk. And breast milk is very powerful. It's you get natural immunities. For me, he got the initial 5 or 6 days of that kind of colostrum, that initial stuff that comes in that has all of that antibody,
Right.
But, with breast milk, even if I would have produced enough to provide for him, it was not enough calories.
Oh.
So many NICU babies go on formula. And I think that was just something I was just never told. And so a lot of friends that have full-term babies that are like, they're very upset by the fact that they either don't produce enough breast milk or their baby doesn't latch well, when they're seeing a lactation consultant. And, I saw one when I was in the NICU that I worked with, that was great. And they had just said, honestly, it's very common, but unfortunately it's kind of the societal pressure that, you have to breastfeed and breastfeed is best. And I've learned fed is best. He's happy, his gut is well adjusted, and he needs calories. So, I mean, now the kid's great. He can throw back a Twinkie, no problem. Like he loves his snacks, but he needs calories. And I think that was just something I was kind of shocked by in the NICU was that, formula's okay. Formula is okay. And he's going to be healthy in formula and it is just fine. But that was just not something I had never thought about. And that's where I can kind of speak to that with some of my friends that have recently had like their first time kid and they're like, it's just not working. I'm like, it's okay. If your kid is fed and the vitamins they need, but I feel like it's still very much a societal pressure. So I'm very happy to whenever they're like, what about formula? I said, he's fine. He's very healthy. He's okay. Formula did okay. Yeah.
That's a really good point because I would never know that either, But I don't have any other questions. Do you, Debbie?
I don't have any other questions. I just wanted to say thank you for sharing it. It's like what a journey and what his little life as he started, how what a little fighter, and we know I have a nephew who was born early like that. I mean, Lori and I know a lot of people. My brother was born very early too. He was very premature.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like,
yeah,
but I was a little kid back then. So of course I didn't see all of it
sure,
and how my mom went through it. But now they know so much more, you know, they're so advanced, you know, so
right.
It's just an incredible thing. And we're just glad that everybody's doing well. And we're glad that you're able to take the time during your lunch hour to be able to be with us. Cause I know that was really important. And we really we tracked you down and got you, you know? So
yeah, no, you did. It's fine. Yeah. So a little update on Evan, just to close it off. So he's 2.5. He's like a solid 23 pounds now, which for him is huge. To me, he's a huge kid, even though he's a skinny mini, but he's got Mike's muscle and my brains. So you know, he's just fine. Yeah, he's doing really well, and doctors are very happy. You know, we really don't have a lot of specialist appointments. The bigger he gets, the farther off they push appointments, and that's always great. You know, the more time you can put between having to see a follow-up is always a good sign. So he is happy and thriving. So we're good. We're good.
Awesome.
Good. You know what we have to plan? Wallace girls have to plan thing where all kids are together. That would
that'd be fun.
So
sure.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
You're welcome.
If anybody has
thanks for inviting me.
You could go ahead and PM W&I and we could send it over to Alise. And Alise, if you want to put in the comments about that Facebook page that you belong to, the support, that would be great.
I can do that.
And
that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And one last thing. Don't forget, we need more people to subscribe to our page. So tell your friends. And if you have anything that we want to talk about, you want us to talk about, or you know somebody that has an interesting story, please let us know. We're always looking for new people. So with that, I'm going to say, everyone, have an awesome weekend. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the weather while it's so nice. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Alise.
Bye. Thanks, ladies.
Bye-bye.
Bye.